care for me has now revived. I know you always cared. It was opportunity you lacked to express it. Not that I'm speaking of want, for I've learned to be content whatever my circumstances. I know what it is to have nothing, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've been thoroughly initiated into fullness and hunger, plenty and poverty. And I am able to face anything through him who gives me strength. All the same, it was kind of you to share the burden of my troubles. Let us bow for just a moment. O God, let the cares of the everyday slip from us. Let us come quiet and available to that word which may be to us new strength and hope and life. In the Spirit of Jesus, Amen. As I was about to say before I was so painfully interrupted, seriously, I do appreciate the calls and cards and the thoughts and prayers of the congregation this week. After my unfortunate mishap, I was reminded as I lay there one day of the old story about the young man who unfortunately had quite a different congregation to serve, and he ended up in the hospital, and the president of the board came to see his minister one day and said, "The board met last night, and I just want you to know it voted to extend to you its best wishes for a speedy recovery." The vote was 5-4. As I was about to say to you last week, I was totally unprepared for one dimension of our experience on our trip to East Germany, and that was the drive through West Germany to the border. The scenery was the same, but the traffic was radically different in quantity and in appearance. The right lane all the way was full of Trabants, or the Trabis, as the East Germans affectionately call them, the little people's car of their country that they wait 10 years for and then try to keep running for another 10 or 20. I have always found it a fascinating piece of machinery ever since I met it almost 30 years ago. Nicknamed the plastic bomb, it's a mini auto that seats 4, in a manner of speaking, and can go at least 90 miles an hour. And to this day, I vividly remember a hair-raising ride across the Oder River Valley with a woman minister who had come to drive me to her church for an evening meeting. It was pitch dark. The seat on my side was broken at the back, so I had to sit straight up. We did at least 70 miles an hour down a narrow blacktop lined with formidable-looking trees, bouncing from one side of the road to the other. She worked the wheel to keep us somewhere on it, and all the while she was jabbering away at me, looking more at me than the road, and I heard not a word she said. Jokes about the Trabi abound over there. They compare it with your lawnmower. It's a 2-cycle engine, oil and gas in the same tank. They say the only difference between your lawnmower is that your lawnmower has no trunk for the groceries. On the other hand, the Trabi has no groceries for the trunk. They say it's the world's quietest automobile because when you sit in it, your knees cover your ears. It does have an excellent rear window defroster to keep your hands warm while you push. In any case, on this day, right after New Year's, the right lane of the Autobahn all the way to the border was full of literally thousands of Trabis puffing and panting their way back home. Mom and Pop in the front, and the rear loaded with kids and all kinds of presents and consumer goods from the West. Smiles on everybody's faces. They looked less like refugees from oppression than from a Kmart sale. And we found traffic at a standstill 25 miles from the border, at an absolute standstill because of the overload of East German shoppers going home. I think it's hard for us to remember what an economic and material wonder we have worked in the Western world in the last 50 years. The deprivations, the depression, the shortages of war are just a distant memory, and we've come to take for granted one of the miracles of human history. The creation of a world in which everyone, even the poor, enjoy luxuries that would have staggered our great-grandfathers. So I suppose it's no wonder that the deprived, east of the rusted-out curtain now, see all this on television and long to be a part of it, enjoy what we enjoy. And I don't for 1 minute blame them. I don't find their scrambling base or ignoble. But I find the reaction of my church friends over there to all this very interesting. To my eye, over the years, they've been less restless and complaining, happier than the population at large. They've certainly been less inclined to flee. Church people have been in the very forefront of the challenge to the system. They've been willing to risk all in the fight for freedom. And yet at the same time, they have encouraged one another not to leave. And I wonder why. Do they know something that others do not know? Friends have spoken to me of the dangerous illusions they feel the present situation represents. Specifically, the illusion that if only they can enjoy the freedom and affluence of the West, they will be happy and fulfilled and all their problems will be solved. My friends do not condemn those who go. They simply raise searching questions about whether they will find what they're looking for. You see, they look at West Germany, where everyone, even to my eye, seems hell-bent on accumulation and distraction, where fewer associate with the Christian church than in East Germany. In West Germany today, there are more Muslim immigrants at worship on this Sunday than there are Christians. And can you blame my friends if they wonder if this is the only possible future? If they see freedom more as an opportunity rather than an ultimate end? If they begin to ask about a real challenge to the human spirit that lurks behind what they hope will be growing freedom and comfort? Will they, like their countrymen in the West, fall into the illusion that if they can only change their circumstance, their outer world, that should do it? Somehow, somewhere, if only we position ourselves just right in this world, then the anxiety and the emptiness and the frustration and the boredom will pass and we will be at peace. If oppression and deprivation have been the source of so much misery and grief in our lives, then surely freedom and comfort will bring relief of spirit and peace of mind. But isn't this the perennial temptation that we all face, no less than they? How shall we understand our freedom and affluence? Shall we too persist in the age-old illusion that inner tranquility and satisfaction are somehow the product of something external to the human self, a better job, a new community, a trimmer body, travel abroad, latest styles, prestigious position, beachfront condo? The list goes on and on. Certainly, somehow, maybe these will do it. You don't think this is a temptation we all face? I am not for a minute ungrateful for all our good and precious gifts in the West. I only point out that contemporary culture seems at times designed to perpetuate the myth that somehow they can do it for us. The passion for diet and designer clothes, the quest for constant stimulation and social world, the frenzied activity to fill our days, suggests a search that has lurking beneath it deep, deep spiritual needs that remain unsatisfied. And ironically, all this activity and acquisition may do little more than lead us away from confrontation with our real inner selves and what is going on there. We do, in fact, in our time, perhaps more than in any other day, we do, in fact, run the risk of gaining the whole world and losing our souls. Jesus says to the Pharisees, you cannot say of the kingdom, look, here it is, or look, there it is, for the kingdom of God is within you. Surely examples abound of the failure to recognize this. Tom Sine, in a book called Why Settle for More and Miss the Best, talks about Mill Valley, California, presumably one of the most desirable communities in the United States, at least outside the North Shore. There is not a residence in the community that sells for less than $1 million. The Porsches and Mercedes are ubiquitous, and yet the homes of Mill Valley mask the highest levels of drug and alcohol abuse in the nation. And teenage suicides and divorce rates are far higher than even here. So what I'm saying is we need to hear the ancient word again, the strange words of one who can say, I know what it is to have nothing, and I know what it is to be wealthy. I've been thoroughly initiated into the fullness of life, plenty and poverty, and I have learned to be content, happy, fulfilled, at peace with myself, whatever my circumstances. You see, here's a human being whose interior world somehow is not shaped entirely by where he is. An interior world that allows him a certain serenity, untouched by the ups and downs of life. The affluence and deprivation he has known, even the presence or absence of friends. He sits in prison in Rome under the threat of death, and he is at peace. So I'd like us to look very briefly this morning at his interior world, its contours and architecture, and ask ourselves whether we do not need to learn better ourselves. I don't know if you've heard of the Templeton Award. You've probably heard of the Templeton Funds. The award is considered the Nobel Prize for the world of religious endeavor. It was established by Sir John Templeton, born in Tennessee, who lives in Bahamas now. He was designated a Wall Street legend some time ago. He was one of the most successful of investment counselors, but he established the award because, as he said, I've always thought that life on earth is just a moment between two eternities, and too many of us attach too much importance to what happens here. And I want to grow spiritually rather than just financially. And I think that's a lurking hunger out there, a growing one, I hope so. But what does it mean to grow spiritually? What kind of interior world is it that makes for real contentment and happiness no matter what life throws at us? How can we shape ourselves inside so that we may discover real fulfillment? Well, several words pop out at me out of Paul's. Let me put it in the form of ABCs, the ABCs of sound inner life. Clearly, it involves learning a certain kind of acceptance. It's not a popular word in a restless world. Whatever state I am in, an acceptance that is able to detach a bit from the world around, from things, not be ruled by it. Here's one who can clearly have and enjoy without being had, without clinging so tightly to things that they dictate. The loss of them represent a real threat to his being. A hunter tells how he once observed an eagle alighting on an ice-crusted limb floating in a river, rushing down toward a waterfall. At any moment, the eagle could, of course, turn loose of that icy perch and soar off into the blue sky. But as the hunter watched, he realized the eagle was not going to let go until finally his talons froze onto the limb, and then it could not let go. At first, he says, the eagle had the limb, but now the limb had the eagle. That's what obsession with the world around us, with possession, with entertainment can do to us. And it's only as we learn a certain inner distance and detachment that we become free of spirit. Remember Dave Garroway of the early days of the Today Show? He said this recently. I've noticed that when people are asked what they want for Christmas, 9 times out of 10 they mention something material, and that used to amuse me, but it's not amusing to me any longer. I happen to be one of those people who can afford anything he wants. But I find that what I really want, I can't buy at all. I want peace of mind, peace of soul, the kind of peace you have when you don't really want anything. acceptance, enough inner distance from desire so that we can truly savor and enjoy without the kind of obsession or anxiety or neediness that turns us into slaves. And I think that acceptance holds for people as well as it does for things. Jack Lemmon comments recently that there was a time in his life when, I quote, "I felt compelled to be the life of every party. I needed the attention to feed my ego. As I got older, I just stopped worrying about what every other person thought of me. I just started accepting myself as a human being, a guy who would get some things right and some things wrong. I came to terms with myself." You see, in fact, the healthiest relationships are those in which need is not so inordinate and anxious that we cannot give one another space, allow one another to grow and be according to our own agenda. Here's the experience, for example, of a much separated and therapized couple, now married 20 years. The wife writes, "I can't truly say our lives are always wonderful, but they sure are a lot better than before. We spent so many years in futile attempts to change one another, by ourselves, with more therapists than I care to remember. Finally, maybe just before we'd exhausted ourselves with all these attempts and all our separations, we both gave up. Decided that what we had wasn't so bad, actually it was pretty good if we could stop trying to make it better. So we pretty much accepted our differences. They haven't gone away, but basically we accept them. We also accept the fact that some parts of our lives together are far from perfect. I suppose you could say it's a kind of resignation or acceptance, but that's far from bad. We sure have lots more energy for other things, and even for enjoying one another from time to time. I feel we did the right thing." Paul writes, "It's a great joy to me that after so long your care for me has revived." Not that I'm speaking of what. Kind of an appropriate and healthy detachment even in his relationship to his best friends. Acceptance of circumstance and belief in oneself, in one's strength. One translation has him saying, "I have learned to find resources in myself. Whatever the circumstance, I can face anything through him who gives me strength." I can face anything. I've enjoyed the story recounted by John Costello in Nation's Business. He writes about Frederick Kappel, one-time chairman and CEO of AT&T, who was conducting the annual shareholders meeting. And it was a particularly trying meeting that ran on, a volatile meeting that wound on into the fourth hour. And Kappel had fielded an awful lot of tough questions, and the hour was late, and he was tired, and the audience was ready to go home. But a woman who's made a specialty, I'm sure they're around, of attending corporate annual meetings still had one more question. She was unhappy with the magnitude of corporate contributions to a good cause. "Mr. Chairman," she asked, "how much did AT&T give to charity?" $10 million last year, Kappel answered. And the woman said mockingly, "I think I'm going to faint." And Kappel smiled patiently and said, "That would be very helpful." But isn't it true that in its own way our culture, no less than that of, if you will, the communist culture, tends to teach helplessness, dependency? We're barraged by ballyhoo insisting that to raise children, to survive society, to make it work, to get through the day, we need this expert, that bromide. Now, I have no objection to going for help, but let me give you a test as to whether it's really help. Does it increase your adequacy, or does it foster feelings of inadequacy and dependency? I can face anything. The interior discovery that there is a strength within equal to any challenge. Not just as a natural talent or characteristic, but a spirit that comes to humble belief and prayer, the Spirit of God Himself, the Spirit of Jesus, a real live power in the midst of life's struggles and challenges. We do not need to depend entirely upon the outer world, upon others, upon the experts, upon the pills, to hold us up and get us through. There's an inner strength that we may learn to tap and enjoy that can enable us to experience calm and confidence right in the middle of the storm. The blind and dumb Helen Keller spoke of her faith as her working energy. Walter Anderson, editor of Parade magazine, interviewed John Ehrlichman immediately after his involvement in Watergate and his stay in prison. And Anderson decided to throw caution to the wind and ask a very pointed question. There's not a city you can enter, he said, not a cab, a hotel, a school, a theater, a store you can visit in which someone might not hold you in contempt. Your very name can inspire revulsion in almost every nook and cranny from coast to coast. How do you live with that? Why haven't you taken your life? I actually thought about dying, Ehrlichman said. I thought about it a lot. And I had to decide for myself whether to live or die. That was my choice. No one else could help me, pull me up out of self-pity. If I couldn't live with the truth that many people would never accept me as a person, if I had to depend upon others for my self-esteem, then I must choose death. If I wanted to live, I had to quit my depression. I had to say that my life had value no matter what anybody else said, and I had to mean it. I chose life. Anderson said he would never forget those words or the voice which spoke them. The language wasn't particularly theological, but the words echoed a strength that arose from deep, deep within. It's not the wind nor the gale, but the set of the sail as we journey on through life, like the winds of the sea are the ways of fate as we journey on through life. 'Tis the set of the soul that decides its goal, and not the calm or the strife. The set of the soul. Will you learn to say with this vibrant old warrior in his prison cell, I have learned to be self-sufficient, whatever my circumstances, I can face anything through him who gives me strength. A kind of acceptance of circumstance, belief in oneself, and then I think commitment to God's cause. Another translation has it, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. In any event, Paul's detachment is not passivity, escape from this world. Paul's strength is not merely in order to survive. His happiness and peace come finally from knowing that he serves a high purpose, a great cause. His contentment is grounded finally in the satisfaction of being on the right side in life. And I think finally there is no happiness or fulfillment for you or me unless we continually renew within us that kind of a commitment. Some inner investment in something out there beyond ourselves. But again, from east and west, we are barraged by words suggesting that real life lies in taking care of ourselves. And so we end up as a people without commitment to anything worth living for, anything that stretches and excites and really satisfies. Certainly yourself is not sufficient cause to generate satisfaction. If all I ever think about, if all I ever invest myself in is myself, my own concerns, my own worries, I end up empty. Two commuters were talking, and they were discussing the whole business of goals in life, and one finally cut the other off by saying, I have 10 major goals. 5 days a week I try to get to work in the morning, and 5 nights a week I try to get home. Not enough. Chuck Colson spoke of his life with Christian Century magazine some time back, and this is what he said. I had arrived at everything I'd ever dreamed of as a kid. I was 41 years old, had a healthy 6-figure law practice, clients waiting at the door, yacht in Chesapeake Bay, a limousine and driver. I was a friend of the president, had all kinds of people working for me and others dying to come to the firm. And I never felt more rotten in my life. And it was only out and beyond Watergate and his days behind bars, as he committed himself to Christ and to prison ministry, that Chuck Colson says he finally found his peace. Many of you are familiar with M. Scott Peck's very influential book, The Road Less Traveled. He's a psychiatrist and I think a significant thinker. In his follow-up book, in the introduction, he makes this quite remarkable statement. After many years of vague identification with Buddhist and Islamic mysticism, I finally made a firm Christian commitment, signified by my baptism on the 9th of March, 1980, at the age of 43. And my commitment to Christianity is now the most important thing in my life, and is, I hope, pervasive and total. Peck found the one thing missing, and that we need as well. We need to revive again and again our commitment in our daily lives in ways appropriate to who we are and where we are. We need to make some investment in the cause of human need or growth or freedom or peace in the cause of Christ. If you were to ask me where my friend Reinhold in East Germany derives his serenity and his satisfaction in life, I think I would answer something like this. I know he savors the gifts of nature and garden and table with deep delight. I've seen it. I know he enjoys the comradeship of family and friendship and church with quiet satisfaction. But his richest sense of peace and reward, I think, comes from knowing that over the years, in times good and times very hard, he has been courageous and faithful in his place to the cause of right, to the cause of Christ. As we spent an afternoon with him and Ingeborg, Reinhold seemed especially eager to take us over to the church, and there he showed us with obvious satisfaction the banners. Crude and primitive, made of old bed sheets, but full of spirit, the banners that he and his people had carried through the streets of Salo in the protest demonstrations of November at no small risk. But the banners were more than protest. One read, "More than just freedom to travel. Life is more than just the liberty to change your location." And it is. Acceptance of your circumstance, belief in yourself, commitment to great cause, that's the way to inner peace, the peace that passes understanding, the peace that keeps both heart and mind, the peace that this world can neither give nor take away. And I'm trying to learn. How about you? Amen.